usually have a guest. We do not have a guest tonight. There you go, Brother Dean. I said one. Oh, it was you, Dean Hendricks Flowers. Good night, brother. Tonight is August 5th, 2021. It's a Thursday night, and we're here to reason for an hour. How is your day going, brother Dean? It's almost over, but how is it going so far? Your mic is not on.
Yeah, good night, good night. I was saying I changed settings tonight. I'm not in the office. I'm at home since I had commitments with those that Brother Philip would refer to as the VIPs. Yeah, so I just come for a ride bike. But I'm definitely glad to be here as usual. It's always a blessing to be alive and to be able to partake in these sessions. So thanks once again for the initiative, and thanks to our regular companions, Sister Pitts, Brother Tate, who are with us, and of course, big up to Sister Trisha, who
Yes.
always accommodate this show live on YouTube and on Zoom. So thanks again to Sister Trish for always
Indeed.
being here.
Respect to Sister Trish for being consistent. And so tonight, one of the things as I'm doing quite a bit of research, I'm finding out that a part of our issue is, as community workers, leaders, and organizers, is we don't know our stories. We don't know what people did in the past to capitalize on it and to let it fuel us. And so because the national narrative speaks about, I believe it's the General Workers Union. Is it the General Workers Union becoming the platform for the People's United Party? It's in their interest to give that political narrative. It's not in their interest to talk about what happened in the early 30s and the level of organization that happened and how impactful it was, because the organizing came from the base, from working class people. And there was a divide between the middle class people, who we oftentimes find that they simply want to take the place of the colonizer. It's not that they want what's best for the working class people. And so until I learn this information, and it's going to take some time, I'll have to read. So I just want to read two excerpts and then have Brother Dean tell us what his thoughts are on those two excerpts. So the first one will be from, and this is one of the best, I really encourage people to read, from Colony to Nation, Women Activists and the Gendering of Politics in Belize, 1912 to 1982, by Annie S. McPherson. And there's a section she has that's called Hurricane from Below. Chapter 3, Popular Protest, the Laborers and Unemployment Association, and the Women's League, 1931 to 1941. On page 124, Popular Politics, 1931 to 1934. Popular resentment of and disillusionment with the colonial order in the early 1930s was uneven and unorganized, but it was widespread and growing. Popular I practiced the word before I say it now. Stoicism was as much a middle-class fantasy as Keziah Mim's quaint loyalty had been in the 1910s. And I know who that Keziah Mims. Soberanis did not conjure the LUA's rebellion out of thin air by force of charisma, but rather connected with a smoldering resentment against a state failing in its properly defined duties and a disappointment with weak middle-class leadership. I'll read the last sentence again, because then they talk about the 1930s, and only tell me it's still relevant in 2021. Soberanis did not conjure the LUA, which is the Labor and Unemployment Association's rebellion, out of thin air by force of charisma, but rather connected with a smoldering resentment against a state failing in its popularly defined duties and a disappointment with weak middle class leadership. As in the late 1910s, a multitude of petitions from individuals and communities flooded the offices of the district commissioners and the colonial secretary, and as a result of the reform efforts of the 1920s, the petitioners' expectations of the state were higher. Desperate people sought emergency relief, leniency from the state's tax collectors, or the state's intervention with hard-hearted landlords. They also evinced strong interest in constitutional discussions and elite middle-class politics in general. Listen to this last paragraph. In Belizean, idle men crowded barber shops, billiard parlors, the liquor clubs, saloons, and parks, arenas where collective discussion led to actions like the April 1931 occupation of the town board offices and a March 1932 job demonstration. Women politicians, it was noted, engaged in heated debates on questions pertaining to their welfare, not only in the water lines and at the market, and not only on questions of relief jobs, housing problems, food prices, and water shortages. By early 1934, many laboring people, urban and rural, female and male, from all ethnic groups and districts, were eager for a new kind of political action. Now, here we are saying over and over again, berating ourselves and our people about we don't know how to work collectively, we're not organized. When that's not the truth, we come from people who are politically conscious and organized. Hundreds and thousands of people. I can hear what you have to say about that part. We are just going to read, go and read the next one, next photo, next book.
Yeah, I think I will commence by my comments with reference to your last statement, yeah, about the narrative that we don't know how to organize, that we don't want disorganized people, and the most difficult thing is to organize Belizeans and to organize, and we even go as far, I mean, to say one of the most difficult thing is to organize people of color, Black people. And clearly, the organized group that you're speaking of were in fact Black people, were in fact people who saw the need to come together and organize in their best interests. And while you were reading, you touched on some points, or the author touched on some points that, such as the state was failing them. There was this dwindling middle class. And as I was listening to you reading, I don't know about you, but it seems to me that we are exactly, or we're on the brink of getting back to the state failing us, and the diminishing, if not dwindling and vanishing middle class. And so it is said that history has a funny way of repeating itself. And when I hear or when I read these books, and I hear you read these books, to me, I don't feel discouraged, Actually, it gives me hope, because and the hope is that history will repeat itself, and that my people will come together and bring about the kind of change that is needed in 2021 or 2022. We don't know when it will happen, but clearly the signs at the times they tell you that history will repeat itself shortly, with Belizean workers, Belizean people getting together and organizing. Those are my initial thoughts on what you read just now. Yeah.
Thanks, brother. There's so many positive examples of, with the LUA was primarily women from Belize City and Stand Creek. And one of the things that they give Antonio Soberanis lots of credit for was that he created the space for women to lead whereas that was not the norm. And the women, because they were primarily the people who were suffering at home with their children, malnutrition. It was after the hurricane. So you had the 1931 hurricane where hundreds of people died. I think it was in 1925 that Mesopotamia division was built, to a space where people were proud of their community as black people. And then, so you have the hurricane, Belize, 3/4 of everything is lost. The economy is ruined. You have the Great Depression. So oftentimes you would hear Sister Sandra say, using 1930s as the benchmark, we're all Belizean broke. So how in a 90 years, let's say 91 years, you have this wealthy, well, all always start off pretty much the same spot. How then get so wealthy? And then born with gold spoon in their mouth. Then come from working class families. And they also talked about Maya people organizing in the north. So this other part that I'm going to read right now gave a good overview of. This is from Colonialism and Resistance in Belize, Essays in Historical Sociology, O. Nigel Boland, Chapter 7, The Labor Movement and the Genesis of Modern Politics in Belize. Now, one of the things that's extremely different is from the first book, it's written by a woman. And it makes a difference when people are writing and how they understand the people they're writing about. And so from O. Nigel Boland, the first paragraph reads, laborers in Belize, as elsewhere in the Caribbean, have persistently struggled against the various systems of control that have been imposed upon them. The revolts and desertions that punctuated the era of slavery gave way after 1838 to spontaneous strikes and absenteeism in an economy that was largely stagnant after about 1850. Disturbances occurred periodically, such as the riots of 1894 and 1919, but the turning point in Belize, as elsewhere, came in the 1930s. Now, we seldom hear mention of the 30s,
Yeah.
Anytime this administration, or for the most part, Belizean talk about the nationalist movement, then talk about the 50s. You see, because if they go before the 50s, that black people and they talk about. And we don't want to be honest about colorism, prejudice and discrimination between brown people and dark skinned people and the class issue. Disturbances occurred periodically, such as the riots of 1894 and 1919, but the turning point in Belize, as elsewhere, came in the 1930s. As author Lewis noted in 1939, it was not until then that there was anything that could be called a movement among the working people of the West Indies. A number of common factors, including wage cuts. Tell me again if any of this sound familiar at 2021. Wage cuts, unemployment, and increased taxation, a drift of the employed to the towns, and a rising political consciousness provoked the emergence of trade unions and political organizations throughout the British West Indies in the decade of depression. Accounts of this developing labor movement, which formed the basis of nationalist movements and modern politics in the 1940s and 50s, have ignored the similar developments that occurred in Belize, though the demonstrations, strikes, and riots began in Belize a year before those in St. Kitts that are generally held to have started the widespread disturbances. So when you talk about the Caribbean, what's happening in the Caribbean, Belize is oftentimes not factored in. What happened in St. Kitts is factored in more. And if you notice a similarity, when we talk about the enslavement of African people, there's always this vibes that, even though people give Emery King credit, it wasn't just Emery King, I forgot the other source, that made it appear that the enslavement of African people were humane to a certain extent. It wasn't as bad because, and that's absolute from a colonial perspective, and then our people just keep repeating it and believing it. And so until African people's stories are told of how vicious the enslavement was, the question continues to arise, are we truly liberated? as opposed to some people's position that the kidnapping, the crossing, colonialism, capitalism is a continuum. The tactics have changed, the methodology have changed, but the same group of people are still in control of primarily labor and the extraction of natural resources and the domination of systems. Those things have not changed. And so there's always a interconnection of these realities. And it's for us, it's up to us, the people who are either because of their purpose, they're placed in position of leadership, or because they were elected or nominated, that we have the responsibility to do a lot of research and cross check and speak to elders. How many people do we know in their 90s that are able to tell us what they remember from the 30s? How many? So make I hear
Uh,
what you say so far.
uh, I wish I could readily, off the top of my head, speak about anybody that I would readily be able to go to who is 90 years old. Wow. I'm here thinking long and hard, and I certainly don't have any grandparents, and even aunts, uncles are not there yet. So I certainly would not be able to speak with elders that I am fully aware of that would be able to enlighten me with regards to the 1930s and the 1940s. Yeah, yeah. But I think you make a very important point when you speak about or when you question how is it that at those times the economy was so bad, and then fast forward in 2020, and the wealth continues to be in the hands of a few, and the system continues to facilitate that it remains in the hands of a few. And so while I am hopeful that not necessarily a violent resistance would occur, but that people will organize and demand, and sometimes for you to bring about change, it will require civil disobedience. I mean, it does. I mean, it would be foolish for me to think that any change in the way we're governed could be brought about through what the former prime minister used to term as this peaceful constructive revolution. I don't see it happening in this era. It has never happened. I think that kind of narrative perhaps contributed to the political parties disturbing the unions and disturbing the labor movement and the organization of workers. And that exists today, that continues today, in that while laborers across this country, I am pretty quite sure that they're smart enough and wise enough to understand and see the need for us to organize and to put whatever political differences we may have aside in the best interest of the collective labor force. The political influence is so deeply entrenched in our way of thinking and how we carry ourselves, that in my view, that is keeping us back. But like I said, once there is life, there is hope, and I am confident that my people will come alive sooner rather than later.
Listen to this. I found this at 7:20. Hurricane from below. This paragraph was very revealing for me. Popular protest, the Laborers and Unemployed Association and the Women's League 1931-1941. On the afternoon of 10 September 1931, with hundreds of school children gathered outdoors to march in celebration of the Battle of St. George's Key, the worst hurricane in living memory came down on Belizean like the wrath of God. With winds of 130 miles per hour and a 15-foot tidal wave, the hurricane cut a stunning swath through the forest northwest of Belizean, destroying three-quarters of the town's housing and killed 1,000 of its 16,000 inhabitants, 6.25%. Many of the dead were the children assembled for the holiday and residents of the Mesopotamian neighborhood. The loss of Mesopotamia was a particularly harsh blow. Built up since 1925 into a healthy and habitable area, it was reduced to a blighted acreage of tangled timbers and mud where hundreds were crushed and drowned under their homes and schools. The authorities carried out mass cremations and burials, while survivors, some injured, others hungry and naked, many homeless, gathered in front of the police station in hope of aid. Luckier than many was 12-year-old George Price, future nationalist leader and prime minister, who saw Wesley Church come crushing down as he walked and swam through the streets from the Jesuit-run St. John's College, then on the south side, across the swing bridge to Queen Street. When we hear what people went through in communities that we know now, it makes me feel different about Mesopotamia community because I'm learning the history. Does it matter to you? Does hearing that make any difference to you, Dean?
Um, I think anything that makes us reflect or think differently about where we where whether where we come from, or whether or in with reference to what you're saying, Mesopotamia, um as somebody who is a Belize City resident, I don't know if that's an era that you grew up in, but of course it would create those stories. It would be synonymous to me picking up a book one day, or speaking with someone one day who would be able to tell me what occurred in Trial Farm, which is the village that I am from, and in which I grew up. So definitely, it has to make you feel different in terms of any new information that gives you a better picture understanding of where we came from, so that we can perhaps understand where we are today.
Indeed, it says working women, particularly Creoles in Belizean and Garifuna in Stand Creek Town, constituted at least half the LUA's membership and were among its sharpest thinkers and most militant activists. I made some notes in Nigel Boland's book on page 122. He talked about what was the chief achievement of the LUA. It says the chief achievement of the 1930s rebellions was the articulation of a militant and democratic working class culture. Militant and democratic working class culture is how Boland described the chief achievement of people organizing in the 1930s. And then they didn't only sign petitions, and they followed through with actions. So in one case, it says, in May 1932, the town board clerk, a Creole, was bold enough to criticize his British superiors. Persons who are capable of clamoring are getting relief, and more deserving cases are being overlooked. Sounds familiar? Owing, we feel, to the want of knowledge of the community generally. While the new governor, Sir Harold Kittermaster, bore significant responsibility through his refusal to believe that starvation conditions loomed, the unofficials contributed by refusing to pass minimum wage laws in 1931 and 1932, by rejecting the legalization of trade unions, and by benefiting the merchant employer class with lower export taxes on Chile and saw lumber. They also gave reconstruction loan money to BEC to build a sawmill and raise the land tax. a measure that effectively hurt only smallholders as large landholders simply refuse to pay. Middle class criticism of these blatantly biased actions translated into belated and weak action that did nothing to secure mass support. So again, you see the divide and conquer between the middle class, between the elite merchant class and working class people. But it didn't stop working class people from organizing and holding those in leadership accountable.
Yeah. Yeah, I wanted to also share uh a point. I believe might have shared this, yeah, yeah, in one of our previous shows, but I am flipping through my laptop here, and it goes back to your original point about us organizing, and and just as a precursor, I want to share this. Where is it? Gee, yeah. Um, in the this goes back to the in it speaks about the 1950s, but yeah, it says in early 1991, organized labor was fragmented, weak, and politically unimportant. In the late 1980s, and this is this is what I find very interesting. In the late 1980s, total union membership was estimated at about 6,000. And I find that interesting because as I reflect on the BNTU and the PSU and the CWU, which would be the three bigger unions, but the BNTU and the PSU would be in the thousands, and I don't think any one of us surpassed the 3,000 mark. So we're seeing that we haven't we have not expanded our reach, or we've not been able to organize laborers beyond what it was in the 1980s. But what's even more, I guess I could use the term scary, is that it says here membership in the GWU grew from 350 in 1943 to over 3,000 in the late 1940s and peaked in 1955 at about 12,000. Now, this article goes on to speak about why it peaked, and it peaked primarily because, of course, there was the coalition between the People's Committee and the General Workers Union. So, of course, I guess that political influence had that, but that's an amazing number. When we talk about 1955, I mean, imagine today if we had unionized workers in those numbers. I think we would be living in a different state of mind, and more importantly, I think we would definitely we would have definitely, or we would be definitely having a stronger middle class and a stronger economy, because
But see,
I am of the
I
view.
don't support numbers to numbers sake.
Okay.
Because remember now, that nationalist narrative is just one person's perspective. We would have to do more research to see how much of that is true and what contributed to the increased numbers. Because that's one of the things that political parties look at. They look at numbers. But
Mhm.
numbers does not equate fairness for people in their employment experiences, in wages, in quality of life, in opportunities, in access to, just for them to have an overall better quality of life. It's 7:30. So make a Lego the mic.
All right.
And here we have Brother Philip and Sister Cynthia, which we seasoned unionists. So you have this segment, Dean.
Yeah. Yeah. So I just perhaps throw this out to commence the conversation, to hear from Brother Philip or Sister Pitts. Um, I still I'm of the view though that the more numbers you have, I think it that is where your bargaining power really comes from. And so you are right that we cannot simply just look at the numbers and assume that that translates into better working conditions and better pay, and a better life on a whole. But I think that based on the numbers that you're able to organize, I think it puts you in a much better position to achieve exactly that, better working conditions, better pay, and a better way of life. So, um, uh, however, as you rightly said, yeah, this is the time whereby we invite those that are with us tonight to contribute, to participate. And so we open the mic for Sister Pitts or Brother Tate to participate in the discussion tonight and to let us hear what their experience and knowledge is.
Good night, people.
Good night, Musale.
Good night, sis.
Good night,
Yes,
Sister Pitts. Good night. Good night.
I am listening to all that is being said. And uppermost in my mind is, okay, we are hearing all of that, but how do we relate that to now? And what do we want now? What are we fighting for, if you want to put it like that? What change do we want now? Yes, it is good to know what happened in the past, because you can learn from the past. But I think that the energies and the trust should be now. What are we fighting for now? And if we believe that knowing the history and the past will help us, well, then we need to have more people hear that history. If we think that that is what is going to fuel us now or help us or make us understand and guide us as to what we need to do. We need to let more people hear then, if we really believe that that is going to help. Some of the things I heard, I had heard about them. George Price being caught up in the 1931 hurricane and swimming, and I think that somebody either wrote or said that it was like he was a special person, no? Because he was saved. He should have died. He swam. He's supposed to have swum, and the building that he was in had crumbled, but like a miracle, this little boy of 12 was plucked out and like saved for some great purpose. I heard that story before. And then the Mesopotamia thing, well, it wasn't said. What Yaya was reading didn't say it, but I know about Mesopotamia from the war. The name of Mesopotamia itself and all the streets that are named, the Baghdad, the Mosul, that came from the Mesopotamia area in Africa, that the fighting, the men who left Belize and were fighting in that 1918 war, World War I, when they came home, they were given plots of land in the Mesopotamia section, and the names that were given were the places that they fought. I had a cousin who died at 95, and he used to tell of his father giving him a machete to go and chop out the land, and he used to think that his father was a cruel man, because he said that he was a young boy, and why this man want give me this machete to chop the grass that was so hard. Apparently the area was a very hard area, tough area. And as a little boy, he was expected to go there and clear the land. Many of them, they sold their lands, and I guess that tied in with the poverty that was around at the time, and not having a good understanding of the value of land, which we know was a part of the whole coming out of slavery thing. It wasn't that the colonial masters wanted anybody to know of the value of land. So I think that some of these men, and they sold their land easily, and they were without land and they had to be renting houses. So I was thinking, why are we only 5 persons? Yes, I know that one can say that numbers doesn't work, but you don't want to be digging a hole in the one place. You want to feel like you are moving. So I would want us to direct our minds to what we can do. What can one do to move along and to make a difference? And I'm also cognizant of the difference in time. In the 1930s, 40s, I think that the thinking was definitely a different thinking. You know, people did not easily think that if I have an argument with you, I will kill you. You know, at that time, that wasn't the thinking. You know, but now the thinking is a different thinking. And the world is a different world. And so you have to factor that in the difference between then and now. And also too, overall in the world, I haven't done the research, but I believe and accept that overall the membership in unions have dropped. And Dean, you might have seen statistics and know more than me about that. But from years ago, we were told that the erosion of unions, the membership in unions in the past were more than the membership now, because it's a different thinking that the employers use now. It's a whole different science that they use when it comes to unions and membership. So those are my immediate thoughts, which is mostly, what do we do now? What can we do? What can we learn from the past to use now, to move on to what we want?
Very important. Very important
comments. For the moment to give Philip a chance to come in.
Okay, Brother Phil.
Well said, Sister Pitts. I only come from the orientation that says you don't fail to plan, you don't plan to fail, you fail to plan. And I believe in doing the research that is necessary for us to come up with that consensus and the way forward in terms of seeing how best we can help our members truly understand what is at stake given the changes that are coming. The pandemic created a lot of economic upheaval, and this is a repeated cycle over time. If we are concerned as it pertains to the pandemic, then the issues that are coming as it relates to climate change and the changes that are coming in terms of all these changes that we are seeing around the world, I believe we don't have a crystal ball, but if we are able to position ourselves to be able to do the research, because at this stage of the game, I believe that we will have to start looking at investments and wealth creation for our members to be able to ensure that when the crisis hits, we are prepared, or whenever the economic situation gets untenable, then we are prepared in order to be able to ensure that we can address some of these things. But Amos earlier this week was having a conversation with respect to a member. I don't know her name, but she was talking about the fact that we need to go to a plant-based diet as compared to eating all this meat, no? But that in itself gave me some information, because part of my training is in agriculture, and also for the fact that you are what you eat. And the conversation on prem was moderation. No? You can't just be eating all this meat and not paying attention to your health. You can't be not paying attention to what's happening around you, because I believe that public officers, because we're dealing with people's income, we're dealing with people's food, and that is tied directly to your income. We're dealing with investment opportunities, because the changes that are coming are rapid. And I think if we aren't trying to be proactive and get ahead of this, we will see some major structural changes that will seriously affect not only us, but our members as well. I will yield for now.
Thanks very much for your comments there, Brother Philip. And I do take note of it. And with reference to Sister Pitt's comments in terms of what do we do to change this mindset and to change this disinterest, and in reference to your comments in terms of wealth creation, I think that back then, when you look at the landscape, it had a lot to do with unemployment. And while we still have that today, what we have today, however, is that a lot of the people who should be engaged are employed. They might not be in the best jobs or the jobs that are paying well, but the job is sufficient to keep them from organizing or from participating in the organizing of workers. And so, with regards to your comment and what she said, when I put them together, I said, I'm thinking that, you know what, as you rightly said, when the harder times come, the union has to be in a position whereby it has its own wealth backing to be able to help laborers who would want to come on board. And so I think the way forward to improve the numbers would be that route. It has to be that route, wealth creation, because clearly trying to go this old-fashioned route, whereby you try to educate and motivate and preach the importance, clearly it's not working. And like I said, the politics, I want a serious thing, and the politics really have we in a bad place right now, where communication with workers is, or communication from worker to worker is concerned.
Let me say, sometimes we need to really value all the contributions and not to chase numbers. So even if there are 2 people here every week, these are placed on YouTube and on Facebook, and people watch them. No, they may not watch them in the numbers we would want. It's a process. And when it comes to building the members, then we each have to take responsibility and say, how many people did I invite this week? How many people did I actively invite this week? And if you're not actively inviting people, each of us I'm talking about here, then that's on you. When we're talking about building people movement, many Belizeans don't value research. They just don't, because they don't understand how much research creates the life that they live. So it's not for everyone. But the fact that we have a space to meet every month, whether people choose to show up or not, the fact that we have it carries great weight as opposed to not having the space. And so I just wanted to admit, I definitely heard what's next, but what's next is up to the people who participate. This is a space for Belizean workers to say whatever they want to say. The fact that there's a space, we have to give mad credit for that, where there wasn't a space before. So what happens is that space is up to the people who actively participate or listen at a later date. I see we have a new person in the room, Daniel Gibson.
No, that's Mr. Charles.
David.
Oh, David, that's David. My apology.
Okay.
Dean, I want to ask, the last time I was there, I was asking you some pointed questions, because I am one for simple, small steps, practical reality. Now you, and I think I referred to your executive the last time, and I'm going back there. Now the discussion that we have on this program, is this the type of discussion that you have among your executive? I mean, these are things that you talk about.
Yeah, yes. These are this is a direction that I am now trying to take my executive, and one of the reasons why several of them who are normally with us on a weekly basis are not here is primarily tonight the CW is making a presentation as it relates to their trade dispute to the NTUCB. And so I have this commitment, so I informed them that I was not able to attend, and I know that the good brother Philip is here. But yes, Sister Pitts, this is the kind of difficult conversation that I'm having with my council, and one of the things that I have to figure out as a leader, as a union leader, is how do I let people understand when you say, look, when I was in this thing, when we made it organize, and Brother Philip always reminds us, when we sign up for this thing, we have to understand the sacrifice that it requires and that it takes. And he always reminds them of your comment that you never gone no Saturday, many months. And that the kind of information or the kind of conviction that you have to put in the modern day unionists for them to understand this is not an easy road. It's not an easy road. It will take time to make a plant that seed and make it grow, but instant gratification. So we fight against that. We fight against that right now.
Can I say something? I think that if you recognize that you know the road that you would like them to see them go down, you recognize it, because I think that people need to be convinced. People don't just follow leaders just so. They have to be convinced, of what you are showing them or telling them. And if it means that it will take some time to do that, well, then you know that it will take time. But I think that you have to understand the reality of persons and human beings. People not just follow your rights so because you say so. They have to really buy into what you are saying and see the need to do whatever you are saying that we need to do. And so if you are telling me that you recognize that, and even if your executive is not there yet totally, but you see the need to present certain facts to them, to get them to reach the point that you want, well, then I think that I just would encourage you because it isn't an easy task.
Definitely not an easy task, Sister Pitts. I think that I have come to the realization when I look at unionists and not only past unionists, and I'll ask Brother Gibson to jump in as soon as I'm through here, but when I look at past unionists and yourself, Brother Hubert, who continues in the fight with the Southern Workers Union, Sister Willoughby, who I think has been a very good leader, controversial in many aspects, if depending on who you speak to. You have Sister Smith, but when you look at those who remain in the struggle, you realize that the plight that I am in as a leader, it's no different from what they're going through right now in terms of creating that belief and giving that hope that people are dying for. Like I said, there's a lot of factors working against us, and I won't lose hope that easily. I'm not one to lose hope easily. So I will stay the course, and I will continue counting my blessings, and looking at the glass half full, because somebody somewhere is being impacted. And if you can convert one person to cause them to question things and to stand for what is right, and to stand for the brothers or sister, because that are the next thing. We have the one other thing with the fight, sister, with the fight selfishness, with the fight greed, with the fight politics, they're not just simply just wanting to organize. So I take your comments very seriously, though. I think, because I think it does gives me, it does cause me, sorry, to reflect a bit, and to analyze where we are, and to perhaps do some measuring in terms of my own platform, which is the PSU, versus this platform. So good night, Brother Gibson. Brother Gibson is another resource person. I want to say thank you, Brother Gibson, for all the information you keep sharing with Brother Philip Tate. He doesn't hoard those information. I want to reassure you of that. And for that, I'm very grateful. I read a lot of your submissions as it relates to several of the national issues. And I thank you very much. And I hope that one day we could engage your organization, perhaps in some work, that, because I think that you have a good thing going on there. So good night. And basically we're discussing the history of organized labor in Belize, no? And so during this second segment, which is 7:30 to 8, we would normally open the mic for anybody that is with us to make a contribution. So the mic is yours if you wish to. You might need to unmute though, Brother Gibson.
I don't know if he's hearing. Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you very much for allowing me to participate. I tried to do it last week, but I didn't get the right connection.
Okay.
First, I'd like to say good evening to all the comrades. And certainly I'd want to congratulate Yaya for her remarkable achievement, for her drive and initiative and perseverance. Yes, we all say perseverance, you endeavor to persevere. And I think what happened on the 1st of August, and the fact that there was a level of mobilization for that, including what Nietzsche did, I think drawing a close and direct connection between history then and reality now for Black people in our society really has hit home. Lots of questions being asked by people who never thought about it because we simply weren't exposed to it. So congratulations. On the matter of unionism, I have reached a point where I think we have to put things in a political perspective, and I'm talking a non-party political perspective that has very much manifested by the CW experience dealing with ESR and government taking decisions and so on around the union, knowing what was coming. It shows that labor is weak in Belize. Labor is divided, and the worst kind of division that labor is experiencing is it's being shared up between the political parties. And so I think that when it comes to leadership needs to have that kind of perspective, that this is not just improvement of workers' rights. There's something pending out there right now, which is a significant fault line that will cause things to be even clearer. And that is that same OSHA or the OSH bill, no, the Occupational Safety and Health Bill, which is really capital saying to labor, look, we want your surplus, but we're not prepared to spend to safeguard you. That for me is a fault line between capital and labor as classes in our society, where if you want to look at the symbolism of the red and blue booklet, which I think really sent a message, seeing that put out there to show that there's a certain oneness between the political parties as they exist right now, serving one political and economic class. And in that equation, Labour does not fit as an equal partner. So it says to me that the mechanism that exists right now, which is the National Trade Union Congress, has got to have some, or require some political arm that mobilizes politically when the right time comes. In other words, is it purely unionistic in the narrow definition of the term, or the broader analysis of the term, which says that if you're going to be that on behalf of workers, then you have got to look at the entire ecology and organize and mobilize around that. So I want to, before getting too long-winded, I think you're on a good track, Brother Dean, and I want to congratulate you for having that kind of perspective, and to let you know that there are people in our society, like myself, who have tried to really grasp the analysis and move accordingly. And the best way that I have been able to do it is to share this analysis. It's not even the beginning of what needs to be known, but at least it's giving some indicators of what the workers of Belize need to be thinking about, understanding the whole process of political socialization that we go through our major source of education, which, if you can look at the reality of not knowing that history of emancipation, or having been abandoned 50 years after the whole observation of it having been abandoned 50 years after 1838. And you have this celebration of the Battle of St. George's Key, where in fact you have to ask questions like, who paddled down the river, paddling whom? Who are paddling? Who are these free blacks or coloreds, as they're called? How could they be voting unless they too were property owners, bearing in mind that slaves were also property owners? So coming back to where this has all progressed and going to the nationalist movement and how Labour was co-opted, finally crushed, and replaced by collaborationist unions, suborned to the political party. It is saying that there's a need for a rethink of the role of Labour in our society. Now, people will say that's so revolutionary, socialist, and it's Marxist and so on. No, put whatever label you want upon it. Let's look at the reality of where Labour is and how the kind of contempt that exists towards Labour that can cause decisions to be made willy-nilly, without fear of any kind of reaction or any prior consideration of consequences. So, starting there, thank you again for the opportunity to participate.
Mr. Gibson, I didn't hear you too well, you know, everything you said, you were kind of low.
But, sorry, yeah.
Is it that you are saying that you think that the labor movement definitely, I think you said that they should develop a political arm?
Yes.
And you think that they need to go political?
Yes. Yes.
When I hear
and it's a question of how that shapes up. It doesn't have to be a political party. You have different types of non-party political formations, but some entity that has clout, that you could have the status quo, but whenever something is to happen or any decision is to be taken, you better talk to Labour. Bearing in mind that that is how our society is divided between Labour and capital.
Whenever I hear that and the politics comes into it, you know, I get a bit nervous and concerned, because you know that it has been successfully achieved that we are stratified politically right now. I think somebody wrote an article, I think it was Colin Hyde, who was saying about a broomstick. And I know that we we used to say that in the past, when George Price was at his heights, it used to be said, you put a broomstick there and that broomstick would be voted for. But then we seem to have moved away from that. And there seemed to be some kind of what should I say, I'm thinking that was not that raw and radical, but now we seem to be swinging back to it.
None at all.
You don't think so?
No, because what I'm saying is that, or perhaps
it is said you have the swing crowd, the crowd that makes an the crowd that makes it or breaks it. And so, yes, I agree with that. Yeah. But when you talk about the union and politics, I guess that we would have to explore some more as to how that would be done.
Well, it's a question of what are the objectives? What do you want to achieve? What is the analysis of the power dynamic that exists right now? And we see that manifested in a number of ways. And I think the classic one is what has happened with the CW. But to understand where the CW is right now is also to understand the history of unionism, where political parties have utilized and exploited unions for purposes that do not directly benefit unions. Political parties have been using the unions as sources of support and so on. I think we are at that kind of place in time when there's a need to seriously look at it and to see where things are. Let's look at, for example, what is the strength of the NTUCB as a political force, as an influencing factor on policy, and it varies, and it finds strength in certain strategic alliances with the private sector. We have the NGOs, sometimes the church, but underlying all that is a certain weakness which is seen or where strength lies and where weaknesses lie. Yeah. The teachers have been very strong in advocacy and in impacting. And so that's a group that is cohesive, that is a very efficient democratic organization that can up and down get responses from its membership. They have a tight, well put together organization. I'm saying that that's the kind of thing that once you define where are we right now? Where is the Belizean worker right now? What is the status or state of unionization? Is there anticipation that there can be more unionization and from that comes strength? Or does that need to have a political strategy that any party knows that this is how you deal with labor, this is what you need to respond to, and if you don't, then there are consequences, to put it in a sort of nutshell. So this thing about what your analogy of the put a stick there and vote for it, I think people are beyond that. But it's,
you don't think so?
To some extent, it's more, and this is where the political ideology comes in. You get something called Plan Blue Belize, you get something before that. It says we will do this, that, and the other. When they get passed, people get bought out, you get used one more time. Politicians continue doing what they want to do at their level in terms of their own state capture. In a sense, it's a state capture by a certain political and legal elite that you're seeing who are serving certain vested interests. And it just needs a bit more exposure, analysis and exposure to show that is what it's all about. So hence this whole symbolism of the red and blue, we put the regardless of what they are, or PUDP as they're called, they're really serving the interests of workers. And as I said, this occupation and safety.
It's a really good conversation, but we're past our 8 o'clock time.
Sorry.
I would definitely like for us to continue the conversation next week for sure. Okay. And I'm willing to compromise the time, Dean, to say we could stop talking at 8:15 because this is this particular conversation has a particular momentum. So we could say from 7:15 to 8, we allow the participants to talk next week. If you're going to be here, participants, actively invite other people, please. And remember that you can look at it on YouTube and Facebook. So thanks for being here with us. We appreciate each of you. Thanks, Dean, for being here. And get home safely if you have to travel home. Take care. Have a good night. Thanks.
Yes. Thank you, Yaya. Thanks to all our participants tonight. And Brother Gibson definitely will be in touch, because I like your line at the conversation, but I also like the comeback from Sister Pitt. So I'm hoping we could continue this conversation next week. Thanks very much for your contribution.
Certainly. I hope you come back, Mr. Gibson.
Coming back, don't worry.
Yes, yes.
All right.
Other people.
Good night, everybody.
All right, good night.
Good night.